There are apologies that never come, words that linger on someone else's tongue, unspoken, unfinished, unreachable. And for a long time, she waited for them. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted to understand. She wanted someone to look her in the eyes and say, "You didn't deserve that." She told herself she had moved on, but every quiet moment betrayed her. A song, a place, a scent, and suddenly the ache returned, not from what happened, but from what was never said after. Closure felt like a door she could see but wasn't allowed to touch. She tried to heal without it. She prayed, she forgave, but deep down she still felt unfinished, like a story missing its final sentence. How do you forgive when no one admits they were wrong? How do you stop hurting when the person who caused it never even noticed? For a long time, she thought forgiveness was impossible without an apology, but she learned that waiting for someone else to heal you is another kind of prison. It gives your peace a condition, and peace that depends on someone else's change will always leave when they do. So, one morning, she decided she was done waiting, not out of pride, but out of mercy. She realized she couldn't make them understand, couldn't make them regret, couldn't rewrite the past, but she could stop carrying it, because every time she replayed it in her mind, she was the one bleeding again, not them. Forgiveness wasn't about letting them back in, it was about letting herself out. It was about choosing peace even when the other person still pretended nothing happened. It was about learning that justice belongs to God, but peace, that was hers to claim. She used to wonder if letting go meant she was weak or naive or too kind, but she began to see that forgiveness is not softness, it's strength disguised as stillness. It's standing in the middle of your own heartbreak and saying, "You no longer control this." And she meant it, not with bitterness, but with quiet resolve. That's when she noticed the shift. The past stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like wisdom. The same words that used to echo like ghosts now sounded small, distant, harmless. And in their place came a new voice, gentle, unwavering, holy, whispering, "You are free now." It didn't happen all at once. Healing never does. It happened in the small things, the mornings she didn't check her phone hoping for closure, the nights she prayed for their peace, not her vindication. It was subtle, invisible, the kind of miracle that doesn't make noise but changes everything quietly. And one day, she realized she didn't need their apology anymore, not because she'd forgotten what happened, but because she finally remembered who she was. Loved, redeemed, whole. She didn't need them to say she deserved better. God had already told her that himself. So, if you've ever waited for an apology that never came, if you've ever rehearsed the words you wish they'd say, this is for you. Because peace doesn't begin with their sorry, it begins with your release. Stay with me. This story is not about bitterness, it's about freedom. It's about learning that you can stop waiting, stop defending, stop bleeding over what's already in God's hands. Because sometimes the greatest healing is not hearing, "I'm sorry," but finally saying, "I forgive you anyway." And if these words reach you tonight, if they find that quiet corner of your heart where the hurt still hums softly, let them remind you of this truth. You don't need their apology to live in peace anymore. It wasn't the argument that hurt the most. It was the silence that came after, the absence of words, the absence of acknowledgement, as if her pain was invisible, as if what broke her never really happened. She kept waiting for a call, for a message, for something that sounded like remorse, but it never came. And each day that passed without an apology felt like proof that maybe she didn't matter as much as she thought, that maybe her pain was too small to be noticed, too inconvenient to be named. At first, she filled the silence with explanations. Maybe they're not ready. Maybe they don't realize how much they hurt me. Maybe I should be more understanding. But understanding doesn't heal what someone refuses to face. And the more she tried to make excuses for them, the less space she had to care for herself. The silence became its own language, a cold one. It said, "You're not worth the truth." And that hurt more than any betrayal, because you can forgive a wound that bleeds, but how do you forgive one that pretends not to exist? So she carried that silence for years, and it echoed in strange places, in her prayers, in her relationships, in the way she hesitated to trust again. It shaped how she saw love, as something fragile, conditional, easily withdrawn. But here's what she didn't know yet. Sometimes the silence isn't punishment. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes God allows the apology to never come so that you learn to stop depending on people who can't see the weight of your heart. It took her a long time to understand that. She wanted closure, but God was giving her freedom. She wanted a conversation, but He was giving her peace. And peace doesn't always sound like words. Sometimes it sounds like release. The silence that once haunted her became the place where she learned to listen differently. Not to their absence, but to His presence. Because while they stayed silent, He spoke softly. Not about what they did, but about who she still was. Still chosen, still loved, still worthy of peace, even without an apology. She used to rehearse the conversation in her mind, over and over. How it would start, what she'd say, how they might finally understand. She'd write the words in her head like a script she knew by heart, the apology she'd waited for, the explanation she deserved. But the scene never came, and for a long time, that absence felt like failure. Because when something breaks, don't we deserve to talk about it? Don't we need to? She wanted to believe that one honest conversation could make the pain make sense. That maybe if they just said the right words, she'd be able to forgive and let go. But not everyone wants truth. Not everyone values closure. Some people move on by pretending nothing happened. And she had to learn, painfully, that pretending doesn't heal anything. It only delays peace. There were nights she still talked to them in her prayers, saying everything she never got to say aloud. Sometimes it was anger, sometimes sorrow, sometimes both. But slowly, those prayers started to change. The tone softened, the words became fewer, and one night, she realized she wasn't talking to them anymore. She was talking to God. She began to understand something sacred, that she didn't need their voice to validate her pain. She didn't need their confession to confirm her worth. The closure she needed wasn't a conversation with them. It was a conversation with grace. Because grace doesn't wait for both sides to agree. It just enters the room, sits with you in the silence, and says, "You can stop explaining now." And when she heard that, something inside her finally exhaled. The anger softened. The words she'd been saving for years lost their urgency. She no longer needed to be heard to be healed. She realized that forgiveness didn't erase what happened. It simply released her from needing to relive it. And that was the turning point. Because when you stop rehearsing what you wish they'd say, you make space to hear what God has been saying all along. It's over now. You're still mine, and you can rest. Forgiveness used to feel unfair. Why should she let go when they never took responsibility? Why should she release the pain when they never even noticed it was there? For years, that question kept her chained, not to them, but to the memory of what they did. She wanted justice, but what she really needed was peace. And one day, she realized those two don't always arrive together. Justice restores what was lost. Peace restores who you are. And she was done losing herself waiting for someone else to make it right. Forgiveness didn't come as a feeling. It came as a choice. A quiet, trembling decision to stop bleeding over the same wound, to stop replaying the moment, to stop wishing the ending were different. It wasn't about excusing what happened. It was about refusing to live as if it were still happening. She had always thought forgiveness was for them, a gift she'd give to the one who hurt her. But now she knew it was for her. It was her way of saying, "You no longer have power here." Her way of making space in her soul for something better than resentment. For grace, for joy, for rest. At first it didn't feel holy. It felt small, fragile, even false. She'd whisper, "I forgive them," and part of her still ached, but she kept saying it, not because she felt ready, but because she wanted to be free. And with each repetition, the words stopped being a wish and started becoming true. She learned that forgiveness doesn't require closure. It doesn't need an apology or a promise. It just needs courage. The kind that says, "I choose peace even if they never change." Because forgiveness is not about rewriting the story. It's about reclaiming the ending. One evening, she stood outside and felt the wind on her skin. It was gentle, steady, almost sacred. And in that breeze, she understood. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's finally being able to remember without reopening the wound. She didn't forgive because they deserved it. She forgave because she did. And that realization didn't need an answer. It just needed her heart, willing, open, healed. At first, she thought peace would arrive with answers, that one day everything would finally make sense, why it happened, why they left, why the apology never came. But when peace finally found her, it didn't explain a thing. It simply said, "You don't need to understand to be free." It came quietly, almost unnoticed. In the morning, she didn't think of them first. In the moments, she didn't replay the past. In the laughter that no longer felt forced. Peace didn't arrive as closure. It arrived as presence. Not a feeling that came and went, but a way of breathing again without fear. There was still tenderness when she remembered, but it was a soft kind, the kind that doesn't ache anymore. Because now, she could look back without wishing for anything to change. The story stayed the same, but her heart was different, and that was enough. She stopped needing to win the narrative. She stopped waiting for justice to look like apology, because she realized God's justice wasn't about proving who was right. It was about healing what was broken. And that's exactly what he did. Her prayers became simpler now. No more why. No more when will they understand. Only thank you. Thank you for the silence that taught me strength. Thank you for the wound that became wisdom. Thank you for the peace that took its place. Sometimes she still wondered if they ever thought of her, if they ever felt the weight of what they did. But it didn't hurt anymore to not know, because she finally believed. She didn't need their sorrow to stay whole. Her wholeness no longer depended on someone else's change. It depended only on the one who never changed. And that realization, that calm, steady truth, became her home. A home built not on explanations, but on trust. Not on words that were never spoken, but on grace that never stopped speaking. And every time she felt that old ache try to return, she smiled softly and said, "There's no room for you anymore." Because where pain once lived, peace had already taken its place. She never got the apology, not in a letter, not in a message, not even in the quiet of her dreams. But somewhere along the way, she stopped needing it. Because the moment she let go of what she was waiting to hear, she finally started to hear what had been true all along. It came softly, not from them, but from him. A whisper that said, "You are not what they did to you. You are not defined by what they never said." And as those words settled into her heart, she felt something shift. The need for closure dissolved into peace. The pain lost its edge, and the silence that once screamed in her mind became holy, still, gentle, redeemed. She realized forgiveness wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about reclaiming the future. It wasn't about proving she was over it, but about deciding she wouldn't live wounded anymore. She didn't need them to understand. She didn't need them to change. She just needed to be free. There was no announcement, no moment that anyone else would have noticed. But she noticed, because she woke up one morning and didn't feel the heaviness anymore. The same memories that once brought her to tears now only brought her gratitude. Gratitude that she had survived. Gratitude that her story didn't end where they left her. Gratitude that God can make peace out of even the most unfinished endings. That's the kind of freedom she found. Not loud, but lasting. Not perfect, but pure. The kind that lets you bless those who hurt you without needing to hear they're sorry. The kind that lets you move forward without looking back for permission. The kind that makes you smile, quietly, because you finally understand that the apology you never got wasn't the closure you needed. It was the beginning of something holier. Now, when she remembers them, it doesn't sting anymore. She just hopes they find the same peace that she did, because that's what grace does. It ends the story with mercy, even when it began with pain. So if you're still waiting for words that never came, this is your sign to stop waiting. You don't need their confession to begin healing. You don't need their sorry to start living again. Peace is not postponed until they understand. Peace is present, right here, right now, in the hands of the one who understood all along. You are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to forgive. You are allowed to walk in freedom, even if no one ever says they're sorry.